Hello, everyone. This is Greg Stuart, CEO of the MMA globally. I appreciate you joining us here today for MMA Impact India. I couldn't thank Monica and the team enough for pulling off another opportunity for community of MMA members to get together. So Monica, thank you for that. Priya, I really appreciate all your efforts too with the board and some of what you're all doing there to help raise the MMA. I know you've got a whole bunch of initiatives around MarTech. The series you're doing around modern marketing, we love. I'm not sure how many of you know that, do you know this? That we used to be the Mobile Marketing Association. We've kind of de-emphasized that. We now see ourselves more, well, we just use MMA, but we see ourselves more as MMA, as Modern Marketing Association. And I know you got a ton of working groups going on there. We too, globally, have done some pretty interesting work. I would strongly encourage you to look at our outcomes versus reach a research series that has just come out here just recently. It's being further developed. We have support from Oxford University and UCLA around that. It really rethinks about how a marketer really produces growth and how you get the best return on investment. It's a big deal. By the way, it changes everything that people believe to be true. So also too, the work that we're doing around marketing org, that's being featured now in Harvard Business Review. We're super excited. That's been a 3-year journey to really rethink how marketers quantitatively redefine their marketing org and make the best decisions. Too often marketing org decisions, I think, are made on politic decisions rather than actual performance. So we're really trying to shift that. It's just one of many things we do, and our data and marketing think, we got so much stuff going on that come out now. I think now is really more than ever MMA's moment. So again, I encourage you today, hope you appreciate it. I will be talking a little bit more about the outcomes versus reach here in a session a little bit later, but appreciate it. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Hello, everyone. This is Greg Stuart, CEO of the MMA. Managing Director and team asked me to share with you some insights around some research that the MMA has done that is really rethinking all of marketing measurement and how we plan to the marketplace. And they asked me to tell you in the sense of a journey of how that works. And so my title for the presentation today is, as you can see, is Solving the Toughest Challenges in Marketing Measurement. And that's really what MMA has set out to do. And we've done that with great expense and dare I say, in some cases, great risk, because we've taken money from people to go solve a problem that we didn't know really is even solvable. And I'd like to just set up here quickly, just to make sure you understand the MMA and why we're taking on something as big as these kinds of topics. So I think you all know that fundamentally the MMA is about architecting the future of marketing with a fixation on driving business growth today. It doesn't mean that we're not trying, it means we're kind of not going to do shiny object stuff. We're really going to focus on what drives real growth for you today. And we do that with an incredibly powerful board, and in fact, new board members to be added on the lower right of this particular slide. And I think we're up to now, at least for the US boards, upwards of 40 plus CMOs, in addition to 80 marketers. So it's become a very powerful body for us to use to really get to the right thing. Now, I don't want to go on and on, but I do want you to know, and this slide will be a little complicated, I apologize for that, that this is a deck that the MMA put together around sort of the intellectual property that we have. In fact, we for a couple of months called it the IP menu. And just to give you an example of what it does, if you take sort of one slide here, like this one here, this is the work we've done in marketing data and attribution. And this work has been done with experts through 2 think tanks, Matt and Dan. And I won't take the time, and happy to send you the slide if you send me a note. They're working with these marketers to really rethink marketing data and attribution. As a result of that, we have also then created a series of products that come out of that. So whether it be our thesis, as some of you know, is around pushing MTA as a measurement technique, marketing, multi-touch attribution as a marketing technique. We built a journey map. We've done the data map. It's a couple of those best work. We're doing some work now with EY around how to apply data to your business and a whole bunch of things. So I want to take you through all this, but just understand that this is just a small snippet of the intellectual property that exists in just this one of what are 4 areas here, marketing data attribution. But the MMA has been very fixated on building revolutionary new IP, intellectual property, to help you. And it just fits in the whole piece of the MMA around, just very scientific, shape the future, and we do stuff without compromise. I mean, I don't need to go on and sell message to the MMA. You're here, you obviously believe and trust that we're going to do the right thing for you. Now, the problem that we set out to address really came out of the SMOCS research the MMA had done some number of years ago. Now, SMOCS stands for, at the time, Smart Mobile Cross Media Effectiveness. I think it was some of the name. We liked the sound of the name, and so we used it. It worked internationally. But in the process of research, we had done 14 MTA studies that we were able to release with intense detail publicly, even changes in sales by these campaigns. And over the course of the 4 or 5 years that we did it, there were 10 brands, 20 support from 25 publishers to help make it work. We tracked $280 million of marketing spend. We conducted 53,000 interviews to monitor brand, and overall spent, a little over $3 million to do that work. And I'm just going to pull out one small nugget so you can kind of see, because what I want to give you today is sort of a sense of where we went on this journey and how we ultimately got to the end point that is next year that, your teams, they are really, MMA teams really wanted me to make sure you knew. So again, this is recapping the studies. We worked with everybody from Coke and MasterCard all the way through to Ford and Molson Coors, Wendy's. And a thing started to happen in doing these studies. You can see here in the timeline, we started to see more targeting strategies appear. We hadn't seen that in the first series of case studies. In fact, remissively so in some regards, we thought, but the markers were getting more advanced. But then look at the level of targeting that started to happen in around either targeting past behavior or contextual or location. We've tried to give some categories to what we saw that we were able to then measure and call out and compare that to other sort of other media. In fact, all the way through to TV, we could measure everything, mobile, digital, you name it, magazines, everything. We measured it all. Now, what was interesting about those studies, if we take and sort of map those out, we started to see something that kind of caught our attention. Behavioral targeting or retargeting was up 2x on average across the studies. So you saw a 2x performance. I mean, if you could spend money and get 2 times the return on investment, you do that a lot. And in some cases, upwards of almost 300% or 3x here, as you saw in the study with Allstate. And we also saw within just contextual targeting, its value, that it was almost double of what the value of the rest of the marketing mix was. So just adding a sense of understanding context and aligning messages even to that, or even not aligning messages, taking messages, putting them in that environment to produce that. We also discovered too that targeting based on weather produces its own regards. And then the whole world shifted dramatically for us with a study by Wendy's. And the studies by Wendy's showed us that we could produce a 5x return by targeting segments that mattered. And by the way, this was people who use coupons, not use a coupon at Wendy's, but they like coupons, and that they traveled by a Wendy's on a probably, home to work kind of basis. We started to see that and started to realize that there was this huge opportunity to really target 5x. We'd never seen 5x. We'd never seen groups that large. But here's what caught our real attention is that part of the budget, we could spend upwards of 10% of the total budget against those 2 segments that were producing 5x returns. And it was that 2x, it was that size of it and a 5x. If you just think for a moment, if you could take 10% plus of your budget and convert it to 5x better performance, how big a gain would that make? And it did. It produced gains in sales that were well over double in sales. Incredible. And so it started to get us to rethink the value of data to what we were doing, what we were looking at. So a number of you know that we've now launched the Marketing Attribution Think Tank, what we commonly call MAT, and it's got a series of objectives to this think tank, and we encourage members to join this. If you're an analytics expert and you're a member of the MMA, you can join this from anywhere in the world. We're happy to be a part of this group. But one of the areas that I wanted to focus on today was around this measurable impact and accountability and some of the work. Now, if you've been around us for a little while, you might have seen this slide, which shows that over the 4 to 5 years, we've produced a series of documents that support marketers in doing better multi-touch attribution. And some of you may or may not know, I'm not the father of MTA. I didn't create it. Rex Briggs did that. But I funded Rex in 2000 to do that. I saw the power of multi-touch attribution as we didn't call it that then, but of this sort of individualized measurement and what could be done with that, and really backed Rex to develop his methodology. And he obviously went off and started a business around that. But there's all this work that we've put together in a body that we think helps a marketer better understand how to make decisions in MTA. And more recently, we've done our great debate series, which we're super excited about, which is bringing the world's best growth frameworks to the table. So Pete Fader at Wharton, or Dominic Hansen at UCLA, or Byron Sharp from Australia, or own Joel Rubinson, who works on a lot of MTA, or Dr. Leslie Wood and Jared Schreiber. And sort of, and we're getting 2,500 people a session to register for these to understand how does growth really work. But it was in doing this work that we also started to see something very funny. We started to realize that maybe some of these philosophies for producing growth, or these frameworks, although well researched, some well researched, some not, which is another story, sort of that there was maybe a different way of looking at this. We saw in essence that you can't just look to see where there's value to be had, but you also need to look like, who are those people, what do they look like, and what's the return on ad spend by those? And so as a result of this, we've now rethought marketing growth frameworks, different than anybody's ever done before. This is brand new information, literally out now, that looks at the science between outcomes-based planning versus what has been more traditionally reach-based planning. Now, I'm going to take a moment to just 30 seconds to try to explain it to you, but it requires more, and I encourage you to see the session from Joel Rubinson on MMA's website under the Great Debates. So here's the first one. First off, typically for almost any brand, there's 20% of the audience that will never buy your product no matter what. They don't like the color of your packaging. I don't know what, it doesn't matter. They will never do it. We also found very conclusive, there's 20% who will always buy your product no matter what. And you don't need to advertise to those two groups. It's this movable middle, as we call it, that you want to focus on most. Now, the challenge is, and again, the popular theory out there is you buy as much reach to target the long tail of your customers. Well, this suggests that isn't the case, and it varies pretty dramatically by the size of your brand. So if you're a brand that has a 50% share, first off, congratulations. But second of all, you have a pretty large movable middle. But if you're a brand of only 5% share, let's say you're a niche brand of some kind, well, then your movable middle is very small. In this case, it suggests here that that movable middle is as much as elastic middle, we could call it, as much as 8. Now, where this becomes really important too is to understand, though, that also smaller brands sometimes have pockets of affinity that you really need to target, and that they have different ones. So the example that we've used, and this is one real world example with a data set that we pulled from Newstar and Numerator and pulling together, and found that even within that, there's a group of segment that will really buy. So think in terms of like, I don't know, it's a great example. Think of like, there's yogurt, there's Greek yogurt, and there's a high sense that probably Greeks would have a greater affinity and buy more Greek yogurt. There would be a higher concentration of buying there, and that you want to understand those different segments. And part of what makes all this really a big deal is that the opportunity to convert people here in this middle, the return on ad spend from them can be as much as 5, and in very rare cases, we see as high as 10x, so 5x to 10x, the return on ad spend, which means you focus there because that's where you're going to produce the best returns. Don't target everybody, because there's 40% aren't going to care, and that's even if you're a really big brand. So again, this requires a lot more explanation, but this is one of the examples of what sort of led MMA down the path. Now, as we were sort of rethinking some of this growth, we started to hear too, and this is really the whole point of my conversation today with you, is to share the brand as performance research methodology that has now, that we've now led ourselves in our journey to really rethink ultimately marketing performance. So just to recap before I kind of go into this, we started with thinking around SMOCs and seeing this change in data. And then we saw the power of MTA and the need for MTA and the need for better targeting and measurement of segments. We were, as an interim step, able to do, using a data set, this analysis around outcomes versus reach, and we started our efforts to support marketers in MTA because we saw that example in the work that we did around the SMOX research. But it also then a big question started to come up, which is that we had a bunch of brands say to us, there was this sort of sense from brand marketers that performance people, performance marketers, were sucking the air out of the business. They were destroying the future of the brand by not being focused on brand. And therefore, ultimately, suggesting in some regards, although maybe producing sales near term was bad for the business. We then also had a situation with performance marketers who said things like, the brand people were just believing rainbows and unicorns. They didn't take that as an art seriously. And we started to look at that. We said, well, there is an issue here with that. Brand marketing does need to be measured, but it needs to be measured over time. And so the thing that we got to, and the thing that you'll see in the work that we're going to execute next year, is that we're trying to figure out how do we build maximum multi-year returns for marketers? How do we help guide them in doing that? And there's two pretty important decisions. One, what is the relationship between brand versus performance? What is the relationship between short-term versus long-term? There has to be an optimization of those two. And to date, there have been no off-the-shelf methodology to measure that. The MMA spent well over $100,000 US last year and figured that out, and has now run that by upwards of 100 marketers to make sure that we got that right. The second thing, and it kind of mentioned a little bit earlier here too, is, well, what are the real market dynamics in market around reach versus targeting? How do we better understand how that might drive performance over time for us? So we take those two very big questions and we put them now into this one research study called Brand as Performance. Now, some of you will know and kind of read behind the scenes here that, you know, we're really pitting two schools of thought out there. We have the Benet Field work and Byron Sharp's work done and how brands grow. That really, as a general, Byron suggests that it's targeting all of consumers. It's focused on bringing new consumers in all the time. And we said, well, no, we don't think that is the case. In fact, the work originally done by Persuadables is very similar to the work in Outcomes versus Reach. And Marketing Evolution had proved this a number of years ago. I mentioned Rex Briggs as the founder of that company. And even the great Dr. Leslie Wood and David Poltrak have sort of supported these kinds of dynamics, that it's much more complicated, that targeting really does have a role. And we do need to understand how to do that, especially in today's marketing system and so on. So this is the methodology framework for doing brand as performance. I don't expect anybody to memorize this. The very simple way to say it, though, is that we're going to measure all channels. We will look for those who are converted to be brand favorables, and then we will measure their sales performance in a second multi-touch study, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, whatever the brand wants. And it's understanding those who are converted to the brand, those who believe the brand, whose brand attitudes have shifted, and their conversion later, that we will shed some light, that we ultimately can define then what is the right mix between brand and performance. And at the same time, resolve this question too, because we'll be measuring by actual channels here, what is the real impact of targeting versus reach. I don't need to bore you with how to do that. This is a, dare I say, overly complicated, detailed slide about the fundamentals of doing it. We could talk more about that if you're interested. I'd encourage you to reach out and have it explained. Certainly this is all complicated by unified IDs and their complexity today, but we believe we have solutions. But again, the answer here is, how do we rebalance our spending? How do we turn brand into performance marketing over time? And what is those dynamics that will produce the best ultimate return for the investment we make over a series of years? And then how do we look at sort of targeting segments and what that means? How do we really dig deep in that? Remember, we didn't set up our study with Wendy's that I mentioned to you earlier. It just came out of the research and we're like, oh my God, if we really thought that through in advance, how much power? And then how do we align media tactics to do that? In somebody's research, they've said all TV is branding. Well, all TV is not branding. Or that makes sense. TV drives some near-term sales too. We know that. Marketers have tested that to years. Research supports that. So how do we think about each one of those? So listen, we're super excited about this study. It's been reviewed a number Currently, we expect both Mosin and CTS to participate. We're still working through some details. The timing's right for them. We hope we will launch here, and hopefully Q1, Q2 of this next year. We want to especially thank Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Verizon Media for their support of this great work. So listen, I don't need to go on to all the other things we're doing. We are in the process of launching a data think tank, which I think would be valuable, and doing some work with EY around data maturity. So I encourage you to keep an eye out for that coming soon. But just in summary, the MMA, as I go back to the original piece I showed you, what we call the IP menu, MMA has 52 pieces of intellectual property that we think redefine the core elements of modern marketing. These aren't just made up. These aren't just one person's opinions. And listen, we're happy if you want to step in and prove us wrong in anything or come up with a new methodology, we understand it. But again, I encourage you to, look for brand performance next year, take advantage of outcomes versus reach, because that's here now that you can use. And take advantage of your MMA and get involved. Join Marketing Attribution Think Tank, Matt. Get involved and find a role for yourself within DAT if you'd like, and let us know. So everyone, I couldn't thank you enough for this opportunity to share this sort of journey that MMA has been on to really rethink modern marketing, some of where the world's hit. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good day.